The territories that would later form the Dutch Republic began as a loose federation known as the 17 Provinces. These regions were inherited and brought under the direct rule of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, also known as Charles I of Spain, in 1543. In 1566, a Protestant Dutch revolt erupted against the rule of Roman Catholic Spain, sparking the 80 Years' War. During and after this conflict, the Dutch concentrated on establishing colonies and trading posts around the globe. While I've already made a video about their rise and their profound impact on world history, today we will explore how their colonial empire eventually fell apart. In Europe, trade became increasingly critical as the age of exploration unfolded. Ports and coastal cities were vital for sustaining economies and generating wealth. One of Europe's key commercial hubs was Amsterdam, which emerged as a center for trade, shipping, and commerce. Access to efficient capital markets enabled the Dutch, starting in the 1580s, to expand their trade routes beyond northern Europe to new markets in the Mediterranean and the Levant. By the end of the 16th century, Dutch ships were venturing to newly discovered lands, including Brazil, the Dutch Gold Coast in Africa, and various Asian islands. These activities brought the Dutch into direct competition with Portugal, which had dominated these trade routes for decades and maintained colonial outposts along the coasts of Brazil, Africa, and the Indian Ocean. From this period onward, the Dutch began establishing small colonies, plantations, and trade posts worldwide in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Enjoying this video? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's completely free and helps us grow so we can keep delivering amazing content just for you. Show your support by liking, commenting, and sharing. We appreciate your engagement. The Spanish-Dutch conflict was a crucial part of the Dutch struggle for independence during the 80 Years' War. At that time, Spain and Portugal were united under the Iberian Union, meaning that Spain's enemies also became Portugal's foes. The Dutch targeted Portuguese colonies, focusing on the lucrative trade networks in Asia, India, Africa, and South America. By doing so, the Dutch solidified their status as a colonial power. In the summer of 1629, the Dutch turned their attention to Brazil, particularly the Pernambuco region, known for its rich sugar plantations. The Dutch launched a fleet of 65 ships and successfully captured the area, establishing what became known as Dutch Brazil or New Holland. This territory encompassed the northern part of Portuguese Brazil during the Dutch colonization of the Americas between 1630 and 1654. In 1640, however, John IV of Portugal declared independence from Spain, and Brazil remained a Portuguese colony. Tensions grew as Portuguese planters in Pernambuco resisted Dutch rule due to cultural and linguistic differences, as well as grievances over taxes. In June 1645, major uprisings erupted. Despite efforts by the Dutch provinces to support a larger expedition to reclaim Brazil, they were ultimately defeated by Portuguese forces in the First and Second Battles of Guararapes. The Dutch finally lost Recife on January 28, 1654, ceding Brazil back to the Portuguese and ending their control over the region. In the following years, Portugal launched expeditions from Brazil to retake Dutch-held territories in Africa across the Atlantic. By 1648, the Dutch had been expelled from Angola, marking another significant loss for their empire in South America and Africa. Further north, the Dutch managed to establish a colony at the beginning of the 17th century in what is now New York State. The West India Company founded a settlement in the region of New Netherland, establishing a base in Albany along the Hudson River. The Dutch prioritized trade, particularly in furs, and regularly sent ships to the area. To protect their interests from French and English competition, they founded a fortified town in 1625 called New Amsterdam. However, challenges soon arose. In 1651, the English Parliament passed the first of the Navigation Acts, restricting Dutch shipping from participating in lucrative trade with England's Caribbean colonies. These acts heightened tensions and contributed to direct hostilities between the two nations. The resulting Anglo-Dutch Wars significantly undermined Dutch naval and trade dominance, marking the beginning of their decline as a global colonial power. The Second Anglo-Dutch War began in 1665. English forces moved to capture New Netherland, an important Dutch settlement in North America. The conflict lasted for 2 years and ended with the Treaty of Breda in 1667. The Navigation Acts were modified more favorably for the Dutch. They retained their valuable territories in Suriname in exchange for ceding New Netherland to England. Although the Dutch briefly regained New Netherland in 1673 during the Third Anglo-Dutch War, It was returned to England the following year, ending Dutch rule in North America but leaving behind a significant Dutch community. During the same period, conflicts arose on the other side of the world with Ming China, primarily due to trade disputes. Chinese General Zheng Qinggong attacked and invaded Formosa. The Dutch defense, led by Governor Frederick Coyet, resisted the Chinese forces for 9 months, but ultimately, Fort Zeelandia surrendered, ending Dutch rule in this territory. In the American Revolutionary War, Britain declared war on the Netherlands, initiating the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War. During this conflict, Britain seized the Dutch colony of Suriname. Under the Treaty of Paris in 1783, Suriname was returned to the Netherlands. In the mid-17th century, the Dutch established colonies in South Africa. However, in 1795, the French Revolutionary Army invaded the Dutch Republic, transforming it into a satellite state of France known as the Batavian Republic. Britain, at war with France, also engaged the Batavian Republic and moved to occupy Dutch colonies in Asia, South Africa, and the Caribbean. Britain and France in 1802, the Cape Colony and the islands of the Dutch West Indies, which had been seized by Britain, were returned to the Dutch. However, Ceylon was not returned and became a British Crown colony. 1 year later, France and Britain were at war again. The British retook the Cape Colony and also invaded and captured the island of Java in 1811. In 1806, Napoleon dissolved the Batavian Republic and established a monarchy with his brother Louis Bonaparte as King of the Netherlands. Napoleon removed Louis from power in 1810, and the country was directly ruled by France until its liberation in 1813. The Napoleonic Wars caused significant losses for the Dutch, as many colonies were taken under foreign control. The Anglo-Dutch Treaty of 1814 ratified that Britain would retain the Cape Colony, Guyana, and Sri Lanka. Anglo-Dutch rivalry in Southeast Asia persisted, particularly over the port of Singapore, which was ceded to the British East India Company in 1819 by the Sultan of Johor. The Dutch claimed a prior treaty signed with the Sultan's predecessor in the previous year had granted them control of the region. To resolve tensions, the Anglo-Dutch Treaty of 1824 was signed. Under this treaty, the Netherlands ceded Malacca and their bases in India to Britain and recognized British control over Singapore. In return, the British agreed not to sign treaties with rulers of islands south of the Straits of Singapore. This treaty divided the islands in this part of the world into 2 spheres of influence, British and Dutch. The Netherlands expanded its control in the East Indies, extending deeper into the mainland beyond the coastal areas, ultimately consolidating control over what is now Indonesia. In 1942, the Empire of Japan invaded the Netherlands East Indies, a territory rich in resources vital to Japan at the time. The Japanese occupation of Indonesia during World War II fueled the independence movement in the region. 2 days after Japan's surrender in August 1945, Indonesian nationalists declared independence. A 4.5-year struggle ensued as the Dutch attempted to re-establish control over their colony. While Dutch forces reoccupied most of the territory, the decolonization movement gained momentum worldwide, and international opinion increasingly favored Indonesian independence. In December 1949, the Netherlands formally recognized Indonesia's sovereignty. Like other European powers, the Dutch focused on newly discovered lands, establishing significant colonies and enhancing their trade and financial resources. Similar to the Portuguese, who were influential but lacked the manpower or resources to create vast colonies, the Dutch also relied on a network of smaller colonies and strategic trade posts. Although this was a practical approach, rivalries with larger and more powerful nations led to the loss of some possessions over time. By the 20th century, many colonies achieved independence during the wave of global decolonization, often encouraged by support from major powers. A big thank you to our incredible supporters. If you'd like to see more videos about the collapse of empires, make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.